Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh, everybody. I'm Preacher Miles, host of the SOS the Shout Out Show. You are in the right place. Do not turn that dial. Do not turn that channel. This is me. This is our platform, brothers and sisters. I want to give a big shout out to the OG, my comedy stepdad, Mr. Dick Gregory, who inspires me in so many ways. Even though he's gone, inspires me in so many ways and gave me the blessing and generosity, so many conversations about how we build community, not just being comedians, but how we build community. As he said, there's a difference between a community and a neighborhood. He taught me the aspect of community, he taught me the value of community, and it's carried over, and it's been very successful and beneficial to the African American community I deal with, as well as the Muslim American community and the Muslim community around the world. I owe a debt of gratitude to that person. I hope wherever you are, you're having a great day. This is Saturday, and I have to say this is a ramp up bit of a Saturday. We're speeding steadily towards our 300th show. The 300th show is really, really important, brothers and sisters, because it's a bit of a landmark for me. Not so much of doing the show, but all of you have been along with me on this process whereby I've learned the craft of doing this program, if you will. I've learned the art and the nuance of being able to talk to you through a computer screen, to use technology to do things I wouldn't have normally been able to do, sans if we did not have COVID-19. I would probably be out on the road telling jokes somewhere, and life would have been okay. But every once in a while, we say, man plans, God plans, God laughs. You know why? Because we don't know. And I'd be a fool if I told you that I didn't imagine someday that we would have a COVID-like situation whereby myself as an artist, all of a sudden, I found myself there was no marketplace for my skills. There's still a marketplace, but it's not a live marketplace where we do live events. So thus, I've had the benefit and the blessing and the hardship and the challenges of trying to figure out how do we reassign value. Mr. Gregory said quite a few things, and if you want that link, I'll try and find it for you. But he said quite a few things that tied to the fact that we have overlooked some of the greatest things in our lives because we think we have to get approval from other people. We think that the aspect of money is the thing that definitely defines our character and our ability to have mobility, relevance, value, and it's not. It really isn't, brothers and sisters. I want to talk about that today. Our topic is the relationship between narrative and money. Narrative and money. But before I get in that, we got a lot of folks in the in the box here. Do we have sound here? All right, we good. We have sound. I'm sorry, brothers and sisters. I just went on this rant. I don't know. I have to figure something out. Please apologize. I don't know. I bought this little microphone and I thought I'm doing some good stuff, and now I'm not. Can anybody hear me? Everybody can hear me or no? 502, no sound. 503, no sound. Quickly, can anybody hear me? Can everybody hear me? Let me know. Can you hear me? All right, got a comment right here. Okay, all right, thank you, Sultana. Wow, I really have to rehash what Mr. Gregory said, but before we do that, let me go back and tell everybody, just say hello to everybody. I'll figure out how to play that. We'll play it tomorrow, inshallah, because I had a lot of stuff based around what he said, but I'm going to paraphrase it. And I think I'm going to actually give you a much newer model of what he was talking about. It just recently happened. So, for lack of a better word, please bear with me. All right? So let me introduce everybody. We got Reed. What's going on, Sister Reed? Thank you again for that chicken noodle soup. It was delicious. You got my mom on saying no sound. The sound is up. Well, Mom, son, it's nice to see that you on the broadcast early, because usually you're trying to figure it out on the technology side. Bless you. Thank you for making it. And we have Sister Sultana, our consulting producer, who makes things run smoothly, except the opening. So let me rework that opening, brothers and sisters. I apologize again. I thought we were going through it. It must be something I'm doing wrong, because the sound should be pretty good. New computer. All right, we got Brother Altaf. Thank you, Brother Altaf, for coming on. Again, apologies. Everybody's saying no sound. This is the second day, so I'm gonna have to take it down. I really thought that this is worked out. It may be something with the internal part, so I'll figure it out, inshallah. All right. My mom says, okay, now good, because we don't want to miss the rest of this. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, little brother. Appreciate you coming on. All right, man. Thank you, Altaf. Appreciate you. I'll work out this thing with Mr. Gregory because I don't want you guys to miss it. I would put it on here at the end, but I'm just going to carry it over if you guys don't mind. All right. Reek in here. Sister Rabinica here. That's the main thing. Sister Rabinica here. I normally tell people who come on the show for the first time, hey, thank you for coming on the show. And I will say that. But, I think I'm going to flip it around. I think I'm going to let my people who actually come on the show on a regular, my stars in the building, I hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you guys up first. And if I see somebody that comes on, I'll holler at them and things like that. But the format is going to change. I have to make a bit of a transition whereby the stars in the building are the people I'm going to be talking to. And if anybody wants to come on and catch what we're talking, I appreciate you, but you got to come on. If there are people who are not in the comment section, the way you get your shout out is you jump into the comment section. This is not a neighborhood. This is a community show. This is a community platform. I'm going to reissue the shout out show as being a community platform. And the reason it's a community platform because we have topics like this, the relationship between narrative and money. Narrative and money. Let me start out by saying something that Mr. Dick Gregory said. He was saying a message to the youth. And his message to the youth was, while we live in this very complicated world, this racial world, he said, don't let it be an obstacle for you. He said, don't say things to young children like you have to be 3 or 4 times better than a white person. He said, don't do that because you create a different kind of valuation for a child that they can't really figure out. They're too young to understand race as a valuation at a young age. You don't want to do that. You set a precedent whereby everybody else gets $1, but instead of you getting $1, you get 93 cents, or you get 90 cents, or you get 86 cents, and you create this inferiority for a child going into a place where it's an open market. And an open market is a place whereby you are able, brothers and sisters, to express what your value is. But it's hard to do that if you already have in your mind from mom and dad and auntie and granddaddy and uncle and auntie and cousins that somehow you deserve to be paid less. Now, understand that we're in a different thing, brothers and sisters. A lot of us are not into finance. And you don't necessarily have to be into finance. What you have to be into, for lack of a better word, is understanding what your value is or the opportunities whereby you can establish value. Okay? Now, every economist knows that there's 3 functions of money. There's store value, unit of account, and of course, the ability to represent a deferral of payment. You see what I'm saying? It's a store value. Now, out of the 3 I'm going to talk about today, the one that I want you to pay close attention to that ties into narrative is store of value. Store of value essentially means that if I give you $5 today and you hold on to it for a week from now it's going to be worth $5. That's the store value. Or if I give you $20 and I ask you to hold on to it longer than 10 weeks with the expectation that the value of that $10 is going to increase because there's conditions. It could be interest, it could be a dividend, but at some point in time, the worst you're going to come out of this situation with store value is the same $10 that you had. Mr. Gregory and I had a conversation about black companies and understanding the language of finance. And it's a language that's not really taught in our schools. It's not a language that we really ruminate in our families. What we do in our families is a conversation about savings, but it's not necessarily a conversation about building business. And that's the difference. On this show, I would love for us at some point in time to build a community, a constituency whereby we can develop a store value and know that at the end, the store value is going to be this, or it's going to be greater than what we originally put in. People going, preach, what are you talking about? I recently took a trip out to Austin. You guys know this. I went out to see Dave Chappelle. I went out to see him for a specific reason. It was a cause and effect reason. Because the last time I saw him, he put out a video called Unforgiving. And in Unforgiving, he issued a challenge whereby he told the people who owned the asset that he signed off on, they paid him for it. He told the world that while I was paid for this asset and I signed on the dotted line, I feel I'm still entitled to whatever it is they came from. So he wanted to change the narrative on the store value. And he was amazing because he made a compelling case, but the case was made in air. You hear what I'm saying? The case was made in air. There was no legal precedent for him to do that. There was no recourse whereby he could put pressure on them outside of the fact that he understood the relationship between narrative and money. Narrative and money. This is a very important case. A very important example I'm about to go into. Because many of us, we struggle, we try to take care of our families and da-da-da-da. And I'm no different. But I feel as we are a family on this platform that I have to begin to share things about how I made it through or how I see myself making it through. And one is the power of narrative. I think it was my mother years ago gave me $1 when I was a kid. And she said, you know how much that dollar is worth in heaven? I said, no. She said, you know how much that dollar is worth in hell? And I said, no. And she said, the main thing is it has no value in heaven or hell. And I was young, and I'm like, what is my mother talking about? And years later, I was in a negotiation where a gentleman hired me to work at his comedy club in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a place called the Comedy Cafe. We're friends now, but we fell out over this. His name was JD, and he was the owner of the Comedy Cafe. And what had happened between JD and I, he had hired me for a gig, and I had booked myself to do some colleges, so I wasn't going to be able to do one of the shows during the week. And we couldn't negotiate on having somebody come in and do that Thursday. He said either you do the Thursday the whole week or you don't do the week at all. And I thought to myself, well, this is interesting because he's making a case. I'm making probably 4 times as much at the college for 1 hour than I would at this comedy club doing 6 or 7 shows. And what was interesting was he made a very, very compelling case, but it was a case written in air. It was a case purely about narrative. He could fire me, but he couldn't fire me for the gig that I had booked for the college. He could fire me for the gig that was going to pay me $800, but he couldn't fire me from the gig that was going to pay me $3,200 or $3,000 or whatever it was back then. And what I learned was all he had was narrative, but he was on the other side of narrative. Thank goodness. I was on the high side of narrative, and I said, not only could I not work your place, but I can take that Thursday I was going to do and book myself on Friday and make way more money than what you were going to pay me. And as a result, I told him, he said, well, if you don't do the week, I won't hire you, fire. And I said, well, you don't have to fire me. I'm not going to do the week. And that was the first time that I actually instituted, if you will, the idea of a narrative and money, understanding the relationship. Dave Chappelle, years from now, when they talk about him and Netflix and Viacom paying him they're repaying him for the Chappelle Show. He signed a contract. He agreed to terms. And then when the show blew up, they were like, we're not going to pay you. But he realized something. And he went to one of the things that he's best at. He's best at narrative. He's best at framing a situation. And he's best at taking it to the people. Hear what I'm saying. The Chappelle Show was what was it? A store of value. It was an asset. The show's almost 12 years old. It was an asset. It's a store of value. Whereby, if you watch it on Netflix or you watch it on Comedy Central, you know what? It's pretty much going to have the same value. That's it. In his idea, in his concept, he came up with two projects. One's called Unforgiven, and he talks about the idea that he felt like Comedy Central had ripped this away from him. They had taken it from him. They had taken his earnings from him, his food money, if you will. And they did, but legally you signed off for it. Well, preach, what does that mean? What's left when you do that? Narrative. The relationship between narrative and money, brothers and sisters, is beautiful because money, particularly the fiat money, which is money the government, only when you get $1, $10 in your hand, we don't do the gold standard anymore. That's been gone since 71. You have dollars now. See, the gold standard was different because the gold was something you could physically touch. It was a standard you could physically touch. Precious metals you could physically touch. The dollar is a fiat model. It only has the value that the government tells you it has. That's why the government can print money when they're ready to do so. But the one thing that the government can't do is give you value for narrative. Herein comes the rub. Why are we waiting for a narrative from the government? Why aren't we doing like Chappelle and creating our own narratives? And these narratives lead to opportunities whereby you're able to establish your own valuation. People often ask me, they say, well, what does that mean? And I'll tell you what it means. It means I can take this phone, right? I can take this phone. Now, there are a bunch of iPhones on here in the world, all over the world, right? I can take this phone. But to the right person, I can construct a narrative around this phone where they're more likely to pay me more than what the phone is actually worth. The art of the sale is not that I'm a great salesman, it's that I have a great narrative. And understanding that people pay for narrative. The story behind the story within the story that takes me to another story, is the commerce that I want all of you to understand what we are doing right here, right now. As we near 300 episodes, there's a narrative to how we do it. There's a narrative to how we got to this point. Not so much that it's 300 shows, it's that we were able to do it 300 times, with 300 audiences, with 300 subjects, really, with 300 technologies. If you multiply this by the fact that it goes out to Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter, the thing becomes much bigger. And you begin to populate the surroundings around you. Better yet, you populate the community around you. So I'm going to ask all of us to begin framing, refining our narrative in terms of value. I've seen a person go into a boss's office, demand a raise, and literally tell the boss what's going to happen if that person walks out the door. If you don't give me a raise, I'm going to walk out the door. But before they walk out the door, what do they tell them? These 3, 4, 5 things are what you're going to face. Knowing that these 3, 4, 5 things, you only need the manager to think of one as valid. And now you have a negotiation. Believe this. We don't get this kind of information. We don't. As a creative, I just felt like, you know what, let's do something different today. Let me talk to all of y'all like we're a community, and we are, and have a discussion about how do we increase the value of our community. Per se, if I gave each of you guys and ladies a share of the ShOUT show, a percent share, $5 everybody has a share. It's $5. Would you hold on to that share for 2 years if you knew that $5 would be worth $100, $150? Of course you would. Why am I saying that? Because between that time and when you're supposed to be due on this share, you've created a lot of narrative. So now your share was $5, but now we get to this point and now it's worth $150, $200. And what is it they're always giving you? What is the government always giving you? What are the advertisers always giving you? They're giving you narrative. Think of tires. Think of snow tires. Snow tires have the same narrative. They tell you what they are. They're snow tires. You use them in the snow. Go buy snow tires. They're going to tell you everything about the depth of the tire in the snow, the tread. They're going to give you narrative. So a tire you normally would have paid $100 for, now you're willing to pay $175. And you won't really understand whether the narrative is real or not until what? You drive the car in the snow. Well, why can't we do that? We're trained, brothers and sisters, to give away our narrative. And the way we give away our narrative is that we're not thinking creatively, I want to say in a forward-thinking way. Thus, we get bombarded with everybody else's narrative. This has happened. I'm going to give a shout out to Miss Eleanor. Hey, how you doing, Miss Eleanor? Big sister, good to see you. But this has happened. The next time you're driving home, and I just want people to understand and pick up clues and cues. The next time you're driving home, think about how many places you see that offer food, that offer drink, that offer food, that offer drink, or offer you some kind of shortcut. Think about this. I'll give you an example about how we're trained. How many of y'all have been on a road trip? Well, I've been on road trips. You used to go with your parents down south or wherever you drove, but you'll be driving. Now I'm 54, so work with me here. When I was 54, you didn't have all the McDonald's on the side of the road. You look at a sign, and it didn't have, at this off-ramp, Taco Bell or Kentucky Fried Chicken. You didn't have that. We used to have to make food to take with us on the road, because if you're driving, man, God forbid, I had to go to Orangeburg, South Carolina. Guess what? It wasn't a whole lot of food going down to Orangeburg, South Carolina. He had to stop at this place called South of the Border, outside of Florence, South Carolina, and that was south of the border, and that was where you could use the bathroom, get a drink or two, but that was it. There was no restaurants or nothing like that. And why did we stop at south of the border? I'm going to tell you why. Because there was a narrative attached to south of the border. It let us know we were close to our destination. Now, the latest thing is when you drive, brothers and sisters, dig this. When you go down the highway, you're primed. Somebody will tell you there's a rest stop. They'll tell you that the off-ramp is here, but they don't tell you that the off-ramp to where you're going is right here. They tell you here's the off-ramp. And then on top of the off-ramp, they'll tell you the food offerings. So when you get on, and here's the killer part, they figured out the more narrative that they can give you, outside of competition, the more narrative that they can give you, the more revenue they're going to get as a group. Per se, you're going down the highway, you jump off, you'll see a McDonald's there. Now maybe that McDonald's did, 300 customers a day. But they realize if I put a Kentucky Fried Chicken on the other side, I've increased the traffic. You're already getting 300 a day anyway, right? Store value. But if I put a Kentucky Fried Chicken out, now the traffic that comes through is 1,000 people. So now you have an opportunity. You're already getting 300. Now you may get 600 customers or 550 customers. And you can do the math. We don't have to talk about orders or anything. Just the sheer volume of engagement increases the value. People buy homes around certain things. People buy homes around schools or hospitals or things like that. And why do they do that? They do it because, they build homes around it. So when they sell homes, this is part of the narrative. We have a new school. We have a hospital. Da, da, da. And in your mind's like, I got to pay for it. Look, if wherever you're going to the hospital, you're going to the hospital. But in our minds, all of a sudden, that's why you pay more for a house. That's why you pay more for a house. Because the narrative is built up about the house. If you ever watch any of the real estate shows on TV, they're like reality shows. And they come and they tell you all this stuff. In the end, it's a freaking house. It's a house. And I fall in love with the narrative, and all of a sudden, especially now with the housing inventory being as if people just plop down money. I can't tell you how many times I've been here working. Somebody calls who I don't know and they go, hey, I'm so-and-so. Is Preacher Moss there? Hey, I'm like, yeah. Like, hey, would you like to make an offer on your home? I'm like, dude, who are you? It's the game. So let me throw this up here. There you go. I've never given away my narrative and have always stipulated what salary I work for us to make and take. Well, you know, you're OG, Sister Rabina, and I appreciate that. I think it's important that you say that, and I think it's important that you say it to the group. That's extremely important. Being in the narrative business, brothers and sisters, gives you a creative leg up. Because when you're talking to individuals in the marketplace, the government has no gravitas. The government can't influence a deal. You're working with their currency, but they're not working as a part of your narrative. Everybody knows you could take something that's worth $10 and go down the street and sell it for $20. Why are you going to be able to sell it for $20? Because somehow that narrative about that thing makes it worth it. And I'm saying, particularly now, and not a reflection on COVID, economics, or anything like that, but we have to go to the thing that, doggone it, gets us into the game and eventually wins us the game. Dave Chappelle got a large sum of money, I don't know how much, from a company who owned the asset that he had no ownership of. Let me say that again. Viacom owned the Chappelle Show. They owned his name. They had no fiduciary responsibility to give him anything. Anything. However, my brother's very smart. He said, you know what? I can't make you give me the money legally. He said, but I can frame the narrative whereby you think that asset that you're holding, if I continue to do it, that asset is going to lose value. It's going to become worthless. If I tell people don't watch the Chappelle Show and they stop watching the Chappelle Show and I get Netflix to take my show off the air as a show of confidence, all of a sudden people are going, well, this could be a problem. This could be a problem. He won with narrative. All I'm saying is you don't have to be Chappelle to win with narrative and understand the relationship between narrative and money. My brothers and sisters, think about it. A store of value. If something is worth $5 today, it should be worth $5 a week from now. But you can increase the value of it if you do what? Increase the volume on the narrative. Yeah, I'm telling everybody, let's get creative. Let's change things around. I'm in my little wheelhouse right now. You know, so much of COVID is trying to survive, trying to strive, but it's not flourish. Survive and strive. I'm trying to flourish now. And I think it's important that we have these conversations because in my heart of hearts, I want all of you to flourish too. It doesn't mean anything if I win and you don't win. It doesn't mean anything if I make $10, you don't make anything. I want this situation to be a community win. When I say a community win, it means whereby everybody's boat is lifted by the level of the water. Everybody has an opportunity to develop and expand and execute and implement narrative. Because that relationship to money is amazing. What is the internet, brothers and sisters? What is the internet? I was talking to a friend of mine today over in Turkey. Good dude. He works over there. He's from the U.S., but he works with the Turkish government. Prime Minister. Good dude. Made a lot of money. In the early 80s, when the internet started, he fell in love. He was practicing Muslim, Sufi Muslim. So back then, you had to buy your email addresses. Remember this? You're buying email addresses, domain names. He chose the name Rumi.com. Rumi.com. And he chose it because of the narrative of Rumi. And when he purchased the domain name, brothers and sisters, it was because he wanted to protect the integrity of Rumi. Some years later, about 3 years ago, Jay-Z and Beyonce had a child, and the child's name was Rumi, R-U-M-I, and they wanted the domain name. I don't know if they knew the narrative behind Rumi, the actual Rumi, but they wanted that name. And they offered upwards of $3 million for a domain name to be able to say Rumi.com about their daughter. Long story short, he didn't give it to him. I asked him why. He said no, because I didn't want the integrity of Rumi. So he's a stand-up guy that way. I don't know how many of us would turn down $3 million. That's not the point. What the point is when he bought the domain, it might have been worth $9.99 a year. But he held on to it. And eventually someone offered him $3 million. I'm not saying that your ideas, if you hold on to them, or your assets as stored value will increase exponentially. But I'm going to tell you something. It most likely is going to increase. And it comes along with the fact that I am willing to develop and expand narrative. Narrative side of the money. Think about this. I'm running a little late. And I apologize, but think about this. Mr. Gregory said this to me years ago. I think we were in D.C. We were in D.C. in between shows. He said something to me. It was on his birthday. He said, do you realize the amount of narrative that's pumped into the African American community? And that narrative says that you don't own your community. So we don't have community banks. We don't have black banks. We used to have black banks. We have black insurance companies, black dentists, black funeral homes. We still got black funeral homes. But my point is that black bank is no longer there anymore. So it doesn't have a relationship with the community that it serves, that it sits in. And you now have a proliferation of banks. They're big banks, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, and a litany of the small banks. Well, if you know how banks work, in the banking industry, a bank has to have basically 99% of its assets on hand. 97% of its assets. A bank has to have 97% of its assets. Now, here's the killer. The other 3%, they're allowed to invest to develop more revenue. How does that happen? Well, so like Mr. Dick Gregory was saying in the video, you have these tax credits and write-offs. But the bank is allowed to invest your money. They invest your money. You sign paperwork that allows them to invest your money, up to 3% of the holdings of the bank. And what they do, 9 times out of 10, up until the recent housing crisis, going back to 2007, 2008, is that they were allowed to invest in things, but they couldn't invest in mortgages. But they were allowed to invest in things. I used to think of all of the little things they used to. Remember the Christmas? You have a Christmas account, and you have a IRA, and you have a CD, and they had all these instruments that were supposed to do what? Make you money. But it didn't really make you money. I mean, the store value was you got a small percentage, brothers and sisters, on your money, while they were able to make billions and billions and billions of dollars on on your investment. Think about it. You have money, but when you run out of money, well, a certain amount of money, they can hit you and say it's $12 service fee. The money just sat there. They figured out, again, the store value on your money. Every month, whether you have the money there or not, they're going to a maintenance fee of $12. And we take it. We take it. Because we realize you got to have your money in the bank, and this is the. But I'm saying this to say, and I'll wrap up. The point of the matter is, and I'll say it here, I know and feel with a high level of confidence that we're much smarter. That we are incredibly intelligent and much more smarter than these old rudimentary instruments that they're giving us. And we win by narrative. Dave Chappelle won by narrative. Allah May Be Funny won by narrative. Malcolm X won by narrative. You know why? Because you're able to take that narrative and take it to your people before other people take your narrative and take it to the people. So what are y'all going to do? I'm offering a challenge. I'm issuing a challenge that, you know what, we need to come up with our own narrative. And understand, like I said, the narrative between the relationship between narrative and money, because I want to see our communities build. Even though COVID has caused all kind of chaos and things like that, it still stands the reason that people are still making money. People are still getting rich. Why can't it be us? Why can we be building sustainable communities, sustainable schools, bettering our schools? If we don't like the public school, brothers and sisters, come up with a Bitcoin just for public education, for black excellence. Come up with a Bitcoin and tell everybody under this Bitcoin, brothers and sisters, if you put in $250 on your child's education and you allow us to hold that Bitcoin for 5 years, that it'll evolve into $1,000 over 4 years, brothers and sisters. Now you've increased the overall ability and purchasing power to improve schools. Think about Bitcoin. Why is everybody crazy about Bitcoin? Because Bitcoin is not beholden. It's not a fiat. It's not slave to what the government perceives as its value. It creates its own value outside of the government. So, what you got for me, Sister Rabina? Also, when a refund is being made to a bank account, it takes 14 days because the bank keeps it holding. Exactly. These are all the hustles. So, I appreciate everybody's patience. We'll be picking this up. This is part of our continuous series on politics, as we talked about understanding relationship understanding the narrative between the relationship between narrative and money. All right. So, got to bounce. I'm gonna put something up here real quick. I want to thank our sponsors, because without the sponsors, it doesn't happen. I want to thank BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Again, that's BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Thank you for sponsoring our show today on the relationship between narrative and money. If you are interested, go to BeFinanciallyIndependent.com, or you can call 1-800-679-3175 and talk personally to Maxine B. Cade, the Harriet Tubman of financial freedom. Talk about the narrative of your financial freedom. The information is free. What you do with it is your thing. But believe me, $1 doesn't have to equal $1 tomorrow. You can take $1, and at the end of the week, it'd be $5. Where's your narrative? Okay, brothers and sisters, I'm going to bounce. I hope everybody is having a good day. I hope I was able to make some sense. I know I like to do jokes, but sometimes like the jokes come from the fact that we are living in some extremely weird times, and it also comes from the fact that sometimes the narratives that we don't know or we don't put out, ironically, the irony, if you will, are the things that make me laugh. It's sort of like the guy who runs around yelling, screaming on the phone. Man, I can't find my phone. I don't know where my phone is. I'm like, but you're on the phone. And shout out to Gorilla Glue Hair Get Lady. I know I went hard on you yesterday. But even Gorilla Glue, even the girl with the Gorilla Glue, come on. That's narrative. That's narrative. She got somebody to get the glue out of her hair for a operation that cost almost $13,000. She got flown out. She's been on TikTok. She's got a mix. See, it is the ability to understand the relationship between narrative and money. And people's going to pay her for that story. Just the interview thing, she's going to make money. Now, I'm not suggesting anybody put Gorilla Glue in their hair, but I'm saying look at how society and business reacts to the narrative. Even Gorilla Glue got involved because Gorilla Glue was making money too. All right, so I got to bounce. You guys have been amazing. I'll see you tomorrow, inshallah. Other than that, until then, work on that narrative, all right? I'm Preacher Moss. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Hey everybody, this is your brother Preacher Moss. Listen, I hope that you enjoyed your shout out show experience. We'll be back with the next show, the next shout out show. A simple ask before you go, please help your brother out. Click that subscribe button, click that notify button, and I'll see you again on this side of the microphone. You probably wonder what that smell is. That's me. I smell good. And the reason I smell good is because I use oils from Tarif Attar. So I'm not saying you can't smell good. I'm not even saying you stink. I'm saying you have the opportunity to smell exquisite. Check out tarifattar.com for some of the best oils and scents in town.